Hi everyone, it's me, Krylios, Team Rayceen Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is Gabrielle Zui from DC Teen Action. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. I am doing well. Now let's start out this interview by, giving our audience, especially for those who don't know, a little background about DC Teens Action and what they do.
Absolutely. So DC Teens Action basically aims to unify students from all over the DC area for social action and civic engagement projects across a broad range of causes and experiences. So we create and promote spaces for teens where they aren't like traditionally present, whether that's, organizing safe group transportation to an immigration rights rally, like some teenagers might not be allowed to ride the metro alone, or, just depending on how their parents are, bringing student voices to a town hall, housing hundreds of students for the March for Our Lives weekend, or just like phone banking with friends.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. It's so great to see, young people taking action like this and really leaning into that. Now, tell me, how did you get involved with DC Teens Action and what spurred you to, fight for social change in your community?
So I actually founded DC Teens Action when I was a senior in high school, around 2.5 years
Uh,
ago.
okay.
And I I mean, I've been involved in various social justice organizations and movements
Hmm.
since probably like middle school.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first protest I went to, I was 13. But yeah, so I founded DC Teens Action because I had recently moved to kind of like the immediate DC area, and I just noticed all of these different student activist groups. There's a huge activist culture among the students here, which is really great, but none of them were connected to each other. There would
Hmm.
be a group in Potomac, Maryland, and a group in Northwest DC that are advocating for the exact same thing and, having protests on the same day. But if they actually joined forces, they could, gain so much more support and be so much more effective in what they're doing. And so I started just the page DC Teens Action as a way, a place to post things that are happening, not just in one neighborhood or one school, but all around the DC area. And then it turned into kind of a network and a group basically for us to bring students from all of these different schools and cities and neighborhoods around the DC area for projects together.
Oh, wow, that is great. That is really, really wonderful. Now tell me, what is the I guess the most fulfilling moment or the most fulfilling thing you've done since you started DC Teens Action?
Um, I think it would be, I don't know, that's really hard. I think the first thing I can think of is simply because it was our first project. So very shortly after starting DC Teens Action, we did this project where we were housing students from all around the country for March for Our Lives weekend.
Yeah,
Basically, like March for Our Lives, was a student-led march, and if you're under 18, you can't get your own hotel. Even if you could, you probably couldn't pay for it because you're, paying for travel and all of these things. So we gathered 400 students' houses from all around the DC area, mostly in Maryland, Montgomery County, but all around the area. And we housed students who were coming in from all over the country. And I think I sent you a picture of the dinner that we held. But yeah, so we had these students coming in from all over the country, and we were just, making this protest accessible to them as teens who, can't get their own hotels and things like that.
yeah.
And the night before the march, we had a dinner where we invited all of the students we were hosting, all of the host families, everything. And just that dinner, bringing everyone together and having some of the speakers from March for Our Lives come and speak to us personally about what we were doing. And just some of the even middle schoolers who had worked really hard to fundraise for their trip all the way down to DC, just hearing everyone's experiences and their stories behind what brought us all together. Yeah, that's a picture from the dinner. That was probably the most rewarding thing I can think of at first, though. Just the whole past 2.5 years with DC Teens Action have been full of many different instances like that, not necessarily on as large of a scale,
Yeah,
but things where people are directly just telling us how DC Teens Action has helped them to come to a protest they never thought they could make their way to, or how it's helped them connect with friends and volunteer opportunities that they never knew about.
definitely. Now tell me, How important would you say it is for teens to get involved, especially in this really, really crucial time when it comes to
Mhm.
social change and racial and social inequality in this country? Tell me how important, the teen voice is in this conversation.
Well, I think it's especially important um, because we are the upcoming voters as teens, whether that's the next year or a few years from now. Voting is really it's really important, and it's not something that alone can achieve change. It's something that needs to come in tandem with protests and many other things. But before you're ready to vote and to I guess like to make those kind of decisions, you really should be involved in what's happening around you, at least be aware of what's happening in this world, so that you have informed decision making.
Yeah.
But also, like, a lot of the issues that we focus on, or issues that the global climate is focusing on right now, really tie into issues that are present in schools, and teens should be the ones advocating for the changes that are happening in their schools. Like when we talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're talking about defunding the police, for example, we're moving funds from, let's say, the police to education services, to mental health services, things like that. And especially when you think about, like, in DC, there are more police officers in each school than school counselors or
Wow.
than school nurses or any of those things. And so, like, we, as students who are being affected by over policing,
Mhm.
and especially Black and brown students and lower income students and students with neurological disorders who are being especially targeted by the school to prison pipeline, we need to add our unique perspective into the Black Lives Matter movement and into the I guess like the police reform or police abolition movement, in regards to the school to prison pipeline, and in regards to making our communities as a whole, but especially our schools, a safer and more equitable place.
Definitely, definitely. Now I know things have changed so much because of this pandemic and because of the coronavirus. So tell me how DC Teens Action have adapted to that, going virtually with certain things or whatever. Tell me about that and adapting to, the new state of affairs in this world.
Yeah, so there's actually two different ways we've been going about that. The first thing is even with coronavirus, there's been a ton of protests happening, and we've really used our Instagram page as a platform for promoting those protests. And something we found is that our audience now isn't just teenagers like it used to be, but it's people from all ages from the DC area in Maryland, Virginia, who kind of come to our page as a source for these protests. And like for me personally, I'm immunocompromised. I have some autoimmune disorders and things like that. And so I can't go out to a lot of these protests myself. It just wouldn't be safe for me. And so a way for me to, help other people who can safely go to protests, spread the word to them, is just through collecting information and posting it on our DC Teens Action page. And so we post these daily protest lists, usually averaging at like 9 protests a day. And yeah, just like people from all over the DC area have ended up coming to our page just to find those lists. So that's been one way that we've been kind of helping out those who are doing things in person, or even like these virtual protests, helping them from our online platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing we've been doing is we've moved our programming online, our programming for students. So something that we did recently was a student protest organizing workshop. And we noticed recently that there haven't been as many protests as there were when this movement first kind of gained more traction back in the beginning of June. And so we thought, we need to keep the momentum going. One way we can do this is by finding students who have led protests in the past and have them educate and inspire more students to lead protests in their own local communities, or protests for policies in their specific school, or taking down a statue in their neighborhood, or things like that. So yeah, that was a really successful workshop that we just led by and for students. And we are working on some more online programming currently. We don't have any dates for them yet, but we do have a planning meeting actually tonight at 7 o'clock. So we will have the date soon. But yeah.
Lovely. Lovely, lovely. Now, before we go, I want you to just, you know, allow our audience to know how they can follow DC Teens Action, keep up with everything that you're doing, and how they can support you for the important work that you're doing.
Yeah, so our most active platform is definitely Instagram. And this is our Instagram page. And you can see our little protest list and everything there. We post the protest content and also a lot of educational content, especially around the DC area, as well as things like Black-owned businesses you can support in the DC area, or petitions you can sign and things like that. Our Instagram username is at DC Teens Action. We have the same username on Twitter, and if you search DC Teens Action on Facebook, you can find us there too, though we don't use it that much. And if you want to support us, we're working on some fundraising ideas right now, but currently we have a Venmo, and it's the same as our Instagram username, at DCTEENSACTION. And yeah, if you actually check out our latest story post on our Instagram, you'll see that Stop Motion DC has recently partnered with us, and so they're going to send a free photo book of photos from DC protests, really great photography, to anyone who makes a donation to DC Teens Action, I think this week. So definitely check that out, because they're a really great arts organization. And yeah, that's where you can find us and how you can support us.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for joining me today. Thank you for the work that you're doing with DC Teens Action. And most of all, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. Bye.
Bye.